Okay, good evening. It is October 17, 2019. This is the Raynham Planning Board. I call the meeting to order, and I will tell everyone that you are being recorded visually and audio, I guess. First thing up, at 6:05, public hearing on Raynham Preserve East, and I have a letter from them. Request to have the hearing regarding this schedule that is scheduled to take place tonight be continued to the next planning board meeting, scheduled to take place on November 7, 2019, signed by Lee Castagnetti for Long Built Homes. I make a motion that we continue the meeting to November 7th at 6:15.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next up, at 6:15, continued public hearing on Cumberland Farms, 883 Broadway, China Garden. Good evening.
Doug Troyer on behalf of Cumberland Farms. With me tonight is Phil Henry of Civil Design, as well as Maureen Chublik from McMahon and Associates, our traffic expert. Do you guys have any notices you need to read or anything?
If I might, just before you get started, Doug had recently represented me on a land court case in some land in Falmouth.
Did you do a good job?
He did. He got the job done and got what we
Okay,
wanted.
you got one vote. So you're going to...
He comes from a good firm and good people, and I mean, I can't get involved in this. So I think.
So you're going to recuse yourself?
Just in
Okay.
case there's any.
You're sticking around
What
for
do
the
they call
6:30?
Appearance of impropriety.
Yeah, something like that.
You're sticking around for 6:30?
Yeah, I'll stick around.
Great.
Okay.
So we met a month and a half ago or so. We kind of went through the project. We went through the plans. We touched upon traffic a little bit, and we continued primarily to provide a full response to your peer review engineering response, as well as wait for the traffic peer review. We did provide our responses to your engineer, I think on September 25th, and then we also received the traffic peer review earlier this week, and we provided a response to that earlier this week as well. So I think probably the best thing to do is potentially go into our response to the engineering and then answer questions concerning that, and then maybe move into the traffic aspect of this case and go from there. That's kind of what I would propose, and see if you guys are okay with us going that route.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn it over to Phil to talk about the peer review response on the engineering side of stuff. Oh, also, we did submit additional materials and revised plans as well, which I'm assuming you guys do have or had copies of.
What's been done about engineering, surveying?
Maybe downstairs.
We mean surveying.
Well, you have some streets and you got a driveway and they're kind of hard to tell where things are.
Well, if you look at the site plan, I don't know if you have things set up.
Did you get my email?
Didn't come through.
Okay, yeah, I'm having trouble getting service. I can put the plan up, I can talk.
Okay, that's fine.
If it comes through, I'll put it up for the see the plan.
Excellent.
Now, I think that we want it over there.
Okay.
So he can get it with the camera.
For the record, my name is Phil Henry with Civil Design Group, the civil engineers on this project. So you had an initial question about surveying, you said?
Yes, as you know, the driveway and the streets are not well-defined.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had surveyed those blurred lines, so to speak. But you can, one could decipher where the curbing should be or wants to be based on a number of things. Crown of the roads, the property line most notably. So we did not have any trouble deciphering where that edge of traveled way should be and where introduction of curb makes sense from an engineering standpoint. Despite the fact that there was very little to go on, there was enough to figure out where they should be.
Okay. Did you mark it?
Mark.
Orange paint or anything?
Oh, on the
Ground?
ground? No.
Okay.
No, we don't typically mark that out.
Okay. Is this land courted land?
Not that I'm aware of.
What was that? I didn't hear what you said.
I asked if it was land courted land.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So I think what Mr. Burke is asking about, and I get the plan on the board behind you, whether the concern was the entrance to the south, where it goes off the layout and it's actually on someone else's property.
Mhm.
I believe his question was whether or not that was going to get repaired or fixed and brought
Yes.
straight out.
Yeah, so if that's the question, I have an update on that. So one of the to-dos from our last meeting was to get in contact with DOT, as, if you recall, as my understanding, they were here about a month prior to that meeting, introducing the whole project as a whole. So we had met with them on October 8th, a few weeks ago, and they had indicated that the plan that we show was, and when I say what we showed, do you mind if I go on to, can the microphones pick me up if I'm over here?
No, I don't think, can you get him? Yeah, you're okay, you
Okay.
said.
So this sidewalk and this curb line, this edge line and this sidewalk was taken from a DOT plan that was provided to us that was styled as the 25% plans back, I think in April or May, maybe.
Okay, earlier this year, yeah.
And it extended as such, and it kept this hitch in this road. However, the more recent 25% plans actually addresses this issue, and that curb line and that sidewalk stop here. Everything else here remains the same. The realignment of the roadway within the right-of-way, and all this curbing here stays the same. So when we met with them, we had talked about, we wanted to confirm with them that this was going to get fixed, and this person here was going to get his or her land back, which is my understanding that they will be. And then our street, or Richard Street, I should say, is going to come in and it's going to stay within the right-of-way. However, logistically speaking, should we get approval, our project will be completed before theirs begins. So, and the one item that is hindering, say, not that we would offer to do this, but say our contractor would be doing this work, is the pole relocation. There are a number of poles that need to be relocated because of this realignment, and the bracing of said poles, which has to happen first. And because that's all under that publicly funded project, that cannot start until DOT starts that project. That's my understanding. So we basically agreed, or they had indicated that should we seek approval and this project gets constructed, we will be constructing pretty much what you see here, except the fact that there's not going to be any new sidewalk, but we are going to tie into the existing sidewalk, which pretty much ends where the proposed sidewalk is shown on this plan, which no longer will be the case. And then when DOT comes in, they're essentially going to be ripping out this landscaping and this curbing
and then forming the roadway. Because right now, if we realign this road before DOT, there's a utility pole right in the road. So logistically speaking, should we get approval, we would be constructing and tying into and maintaining that hitch until DOT comes and fixes that.
Was there any discussion about land taking? Did they proceed taking any of that?
No, they're not taking any land, they're actually.
I don't mean from there, I mean right across the front.
Oh, no, the roadway is actually shifting away from our project, and it's going further to the west.
Really? Even with the two bike lanes and sidewalks on both sides, huh? Wow. That's
I mean,
surprising.
it's ever so slight, and I think it's mainly being achieved because there's going to be a horizontal change in this roadway, but yeah, it is moving away from our site. Ever so
Interesting.
slightly.
Okay.
While you're over there, we have 3 side streets, well, 2 on the side and 1 in the back. Are they all public roads?
Yes. We had reached out.
Yeah, basically, in connection with these roads, it's our understanding that Sylvain Street was taken by town of Raynham back in 1952. There's no record of what happened with Wayne or in connection with Richard Street. The town clerk has informed us that they're state roads, which we have not been able to confirm or deny.
What's a state road?
That's exactly my point. So it's not something which we are aware of, but that's pursuant to your town clerk. It's basically an accepted state road. What I have basically been able to locate is that it appears that way back in 1950, Napoleon Sylvain owned the entire area. He basically subdivided it in around 1950 and created all these various lots. And he also created Sylvain's Road, Wayne, and also Richard. In 1950, he went and, or actually in 1952, he went to basically have Sylvain Street accepted as a public road. I haven't seen any town records. I'm not sure if there are any town records that go back to whether or not Wayne Street or Richard Street were part of that or not. But it doesn't appear, based on your town clerk's responses to us, that the other 2 roads were not accepted, but Sylvain Street was accepted. That's our understanding at this time.
Any issues with, if a couple of them are private ways, using them for your construction? And
Not at all. For us, we're not doing anything on Sylvain Street. You guys, DPW would have oversight on Sylvain because it is an accepted road. Richard Street, there's 2 options. Either the town accepted them back in 1950 and there's some sort of record-keeping issue. It doesn't make any sense for someone to subdivide this property, create these roads, go into having them accepted, and not have the other 3 accepted at the same time. It just makes 0 sense to me. So without absent the town looking at its historic records to determine whether or not that exists, it's just unknown. So there's one option is that it is private road, and if it is private road, then we own to the middle of the road pursuant to the derelict fee statute, and therefore we have the ability to maintain and repair that area. So it wouldn't be, in the areas in which we're looking to do work on, we would not have any issue. And in fact, Mass DOT, if they take that little wedge out and straighten out Richard Street, they're going to be taking the portion to which Cumberland Farms, or the property owner of 883 Broadway, has rights to. And they wouldn't necessarily be the only individuals that had an issue with that unless it interferes with the use of that right-of-way for other access, which I don't believe that that's going to happen. So.
Okay.
And then the good news for the law firm that lives there is, or not live there, but the law firm that has a building there, they're going to get their property back because whoever built it back in 1950 did this little jog out. And basically it's been there ever since. I don't know if this town has maintained those roads, if you snowplowed them, if you've done anything on them. I'm assuming you're doing that on Sylvain Street. I'm not sure if you're doing it on Wayne or if you're doing it on Richard Street, but if you are, there's another option here that the town has, in essence, obtained these through prescription. And it's actually, the town would actually own those roads, because there's 3 different ways in which you can purchase roads or have a public way. You can dedicate it, you can do it by prescription, or you can go through the process of having it accepted. And since 1950, if in fact this town has been maintaining those roads, there's an argument that it's been, basically the town has obtained them through prescription. But again, without going through the necessary history of this, it's unknown at this time as to what's going on with that.
Okay.
But there should not be any interference in connection with Cumberland Farms' ability to do what it's looking to do there. And in fact, if Mass DOT comes out and straightens it out, I think it's going to be all better for everybody, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Find out why it's like that.
Mhm.
They had a telephone pole in the way in 1952, so they decided not
That's
to
true.
go through the telephone pole.
That's exactly,
They
Yeah,
made it
yeah.
off to the side because there was no oversight.
Yeah.
And that's why you have it the way it is today.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so also the entire tract of land that Doug was referring to included all the lots fronting on Richard Street, plus the subject lot, plus Mr. Sylvain had area down here as well. So when he subdivided this into a 17-lot subdivision, that building, the current restaurant building, was the only building in this whole entire tract of land. So it had its parking already striped at that time. So it was probably a combination of the utility pole at one point and just a matter of convenience of just coming in and just poorly executed documentation at that point.
And you say he created 17
I
lots.
think it was 17 lots.
How many are actually built on?
Every single one of them.
Well,
There's
except
how many
for
houses
this
there?
one. There's
Okay.
still not a house on this one, right?
Okay.
The corner.
All the lots that he created, actually, I believe, were sold out of that. So I'm not sure if they were actually constructed on, but all the lots, to my understanding, were sold.
Okay. Well, why don't you 2 engineers talk about any issues you have between you?
Well, so let me just, I wanted to give the board an update on 3 matters. DOT, which we just spoke about. We also met with Mr. Buckley on site, and as I understand it, he issued that email back on July 2nd that we were in receipt of at our last hearing. And we had addressed, we had responded to those 5 comments that he had in a letter. Has this board had a chance to review that letter?
No, I
Um,
don't see it.
Yeah, I don't
Oh, really?
remember seeing it either.
Okay.
It was,
We sent it to.
we sent it, yeah. So on or about September 25th, a mailing from Civil Design Group to the Raynham Planning Board was sent. I believe it was also sent via email as well.
You're talking about a letter from you or a letter from him?
Civil Design Group.
From our
Oh,
office.
so- I'm sorry, I thought you meant Ed.
Yeah,
Civil
yeah,
design,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
September 26th, yeah.
Yeah, September 26th, yep, it's a 2-page document.
I've got September 24th.
Here's a copy. You got it.
So, and we also met with him on site, so if you'd like, I'm happy to bring the board up to speed, because I think this is probably the crux of what we're going to be talking tonight about.
Okay.
So this isn't the one we're talking about.
That's probably the
This is
letter back
requesting
to,
waivers.
yeah, that's the letter back to Nitch.
All right.
Through that fill form.
Yeah,
All right.
the Buckley letter?
Yeah, the Buckley letter.
Okay, so he had 5 comments that he had issued back on July 2nd, and we had responded to him, but before doing so, we met with him on site. And so basically, just running through down here, his first comment was asking of the status of the street acceptance of Richard, Sylvain, and Wayne. And I had asked him at that meeting, because he had mentioned that there are a number of streets and roads in this town that he's trying to figure out. And I said, well, when you're figuring out on the other streets what the status is, who do you ask? And he said the town clerk. So I simply just asked the town clerk, and her response was, Sylvain Street was accepted by the town in March of 1952, which we learned about tonight. And then Richard Street and Wayne Street are state-accepted streets. When we were at DOT on October 8th, which was 2 weeks after this letter, we had asked them about Richard Street and Wayne Street, and they made it abundantly clear to me that they do not own those streets. And they said that the ownership lies in whoever's maintaining them at this point, which I believe is the town in terms of snow plowing and so on.
Okay. Would you verify that for our next meeting?
Verified,
Who maintains the streets?
okay.
It's not really our responsibility to verify. I basically, I've talked to that already tonight. There's no records. It's actually, it would really be DPW's responsibility or town clerk's responsibility in order to determine whether or not the Board of Selectmen back in 1952 accepted those two roads or not.
Well, I'm not asking who owns or who's accepted, I'm asking who's maintaining.
Our understanding is the town has been maintaining them since 1952.
All right, thank you.
Well, I might be able to answer that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sure.
Betty on Main
Go.
Street.
Go up and identify yourself, please. Excuse me.
Chris Petty, 2 Wayne Street. I don't know if it'll answer your question, but I do know the town plows our street and has for many years.
Mhm.
I also know that they installed the sewer down Sylvain and down Richard, and then repaved on that a couple of years later after settle or whatever.
Okay.
So
All
I
right.
do know that part. Wayne, I'm not sure, because they didn't put sewer on Wayne. We go off of Sylvain.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Comment number 2 was in relation to our first conversation about a portion of Richard Street appears to cross over Lot 210 onto private property. So my response was that, yes, it does, and DOT will be realigning that roadway and restoring their front yard. Number 3 talked about stormwater collection and treatment system, and I guess I'll read the comment verbatim. Mr. Buckley had indicated the stormwater collection and treatment system for this project appears to be minimal and primarily a sheet flow design that may likely overflow onto existing roadways and private properties, particularly in the winter months. Existing roadways do not have significant stormwater and stormwater control available to handle surface water sheet flow from the site. The potential for street and private property flooding and icing is high for areas surrounding the site. Stormwater design should be reviewed by the planning board engineer. It subsequently was, and I'm not speaking for Steve, but I think we feel that we mitigate the stormwater management operation and design as described at our last hearing. But I think, I'll let Steve respond again, and we can maybe get into that discussion after I go through the numbers 4 and 5. The existing roadways, number 4 was, existing roadways will receive a substantial increase in heavy truck and vehicular traffic. These roads should be brought up to standards as part of this project. On our site visit, Mr. Buckley is requesting or requiring the mill and overlay up to the zone line. He would like all this milled and overlaid, all this milled and overlaid. At the time, at that meeting, our client was also there, Cumberland Farms, and they had agreed to mill and overlay up to the driveways, the easterly part of the easterly driveways, for where there is going to be the significant traffic, or not, I shouldn't say significant traffic, the traffic increase, because there's no reason why anyone should be going past these streets unless they're homeowners.
Well, your trucks, when they make deliveries, both gas and whatever.
Yeah, they won't be going back. They won't be going back behind these curb cuts.
Where are you going to have your gas truck pull in? I presume it's right out by the street.
Yeah, it's gonna come in, through here, load on the right side, and then go on this way.
Okay. And what about truck for everything else?
Yeah, so box trucks,
Box truck.
for instance, would most likely come in this way, back in this loading area, and then use one of the two curb cuts on Richard Street. And then the garbage trucks are head-in trucks, operations, with their forks.
Okay.
So, obviously that's a point where, of disagreements, but obviously, as the conversation evolves, it's ultimately up to this board's discretion. And number 5 was talking about the town of Raynham should be provided information for any DOT review and comment. 88 pedestrian access should be addressed to facilitate safe access from Broadway into the site to the building entrance. This may warrant granite curbing, sidewalks along Sylvain Street and Richard Street. At that meeting, we had talked about introducing a sidewalk connection from Broadway along this side into the store here. So we'd be willing to, should we get approval, accept a condition that an internal sidewalk should be incorporated into the design. So that's the 5 comments that we responded to. So I think it's maybe appropriate to circle back on the stormwater topic, but also dovetail into Niche's peer review, which we had responded to, which I think you guys have. We have not received a formal response yet. However, the initial comments were fairly benign in nature, and particularly the stormwater comment really focused around water quality, particularly along the front yard of that property. And at that time, Steve and I had coordinated and talked about improvements onto that swale area that now has been improved upon more as a stone swale area with some check dams. So, however, we have not received a formal response. Obviously, Steve's here, so now perhaps is a good time to have that dialogue.
Okay, and one of my big concerns is the drainage in the streets on either side.
Yeah.
Because that's where people are going to be driving in and out of. And the highway superintendent is concerned. A combination of redoing those roads and whatever kind of drainage system needs to be put in.
Okay. I think, let's have that dialogue, but I think I want to make the point that if that is ultimately what the planning board wants or requests, or if that's what DPW wants, I think it's important to make the distinction that it's not perhaps a design flaw of the project. Perhaps it's an off-site mitigation that is being requested upon. So I don't want that to be a reason for a denial, rather as opposed to a condition of approval. So I just want to make that distinction, if Steve agrees, but let's have that dialogue.
Okay. Steve, have you had any discussion with DOT?
So I've not, only through a couple of emails with Mr. Buckley expressing his concern about drainage on the surrounding site.
Okay. At
So
some point, you're going to have a good idea of what they're doing so that this project and the DOT project will go smoothly together?
yes, that would be the ideal plan.
Okay. And I asked you the question too soon. Start with who your name is and who you are.
For the record, Stephen Ventresca, Niche Engineering.
Okay.
And just to sort of follow back on the drainage for the site itself, we did review and did have a conversation with Phil about the drainage for the site. And based on the calculations that he provided and understanding that the groundwater here is elevated, this is the best approach that they could do given the site constraints. And so they are sheeting water from essentially from about a quarter of the way into the building. As you look into the site, all of that is sheeting towards Broadway, and they're collecting that water in that green area in front of the site. What I did add, and the rest of that site does sheet out towards the back, and as you know, there is that green area in the back that will absorb the majority of the water sheeting off. But they do have controls at the back of the site, which allows for the water to be slowed down before it leaves, or it's actually trying to go around the sides of the site and be absorbed by the landscape. So there is some attenuation that's happening.
I'm worried about icy roads on either side with, people pulling in and out of those driveways.
And so that is a concern, and the applicant has provided trench drains at the entrance locations and has provided grading for the site that's greater than 1%, which allows for the water to continually move through the site. So if we had seen grades that were less than 1%, then I would start to have a concern about water that would be sheeting and potentially freezing as it moves. Obviously, they'll be doing controls with sand and with salt on the site, which is where my focus started to go towards water quality and how do we improve the water quality as it sheets down towards that green area on Broadway. There is an existing catch basin that's there that does connect to the MassDOT system, so that's going to stay, and they can use that as an overflow for larger storm events. I know that I did ask the applicant to look at using the edges of the site for additional stormwater capacity. I was told that there was discussions with other members in town, and they were dissuaded from using those areas for bioretention, which is what I'd asked them to look at. So there, in addition to physical constraints, there's also other constraints for the site, and so I think based on what we have for the site, it's the best that they could do, and it's definitely an improvement from what was there. They are reducing impervious, not by a lot, but they are reducing impervious area. So all of that contributes. Reducing impervious area, providing better water quality, reducing rate of flow from the existing site to the proposed site.
The back part of the lot, which is in a residential zone, and there's vegetation in it, is any of that vegetation going to get removed, or is anything?
None of that will be touched, based on the plans that were provided by the applicant and discussions that not only this board has had, but I believe with other.
Any
boards.
water flowing into that?
There, currently, there's a tiny bit of water that flows off the back of the site there, and I think it's, based on my memory from the existing, it's reduced from the existing as well. So there's less water going towards the back of the site than what is in the post condition than what's happening now.
Is there room to put in some more evergreen trees?
I'm sure there is. It looks like there is, and I don't know operationally for this site if that would be a hindrance. But yes, based on what I'm seeing on the rendering, it looks like you can add in the grading plan. You can add some additional landscape there. You may be able to try to do a smaller depression. When I say small, I'm talking 3 to 6 inches to hold some water, but not anything appreciable for larger storm events.
Okay.
So it's an incremental approach.
All right. John, do you got any questions? No. Okay, Russ? No. All right.
Anything else?
I'm just concerned with what Mr. Buckley has to say.
And I agree, and we did, as I think I said, we did try to meet, and I know Mr. Buckley was away last week, and then this week I think he was catching up. So if we can meet next week and try to understand an approach for stormwater on these streets, and then hopefully come back with a solution.
Okay.
We will do that.
All right. What else would you like to talk about? Anything?
I guess the other things are more items to discuss maybe with Bob as far as lighting, and I can also put them into my letter when I close it out, as far as, providing more cutoff for lights, or looking at maybe dimming the lights at certain times of the day. I do know that Cumberland Farms has music associated with, pumping at the pump or the fill stations. Maybe there's some reduction in or elimination of music after a certain time of day. As I understand, this is a 24/7. So it's those kind of quality of life issues, understanding that there are residents around that are concerned about.
Traffic flow seems fine and enough parking?
Traffic flow seems fine, the parking is adequate for the site. As previous projects or gas stations that have been permitted in the town, they are using the areas where you fill the cars with gasoline as parking areas, so that has been approved by the board in the past. So they do meet the requirements for parking. Traffic flow, they've provided some diagrams for fill trucks. It's appropriate. The only question that I would ask is, can they provide a diagram for the turning movements once Richard Street gets realigned into the final condition, because now it has more of a sweeping angle out onto Broadway, so it's an easier movement for the larger trucks, and so I think that would be appropriate to ask the applicant to provide a turning movement for the final location of Richard Street.
Is there going to be diesel sold?
My understanding is that there will be diesel.
So there's a possibility of some larger vehicles trying to get in there to pump?
It's certainly a possibility. I don't think, I'll let the applicant explain, but my experience, Cumberland Farms and gas stations, it's usually, landscape trucks and with a trailer that would fill up with diesel, and nothing larger or longer than that.
Good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
And I hear you say it's going to be a 24/7 operation.
That was in the narrative, and I don't know if things have changed, but that's what I saw in the narrative.
Will you answer that?
That is the initial request that we are looking for, but we understand it's the discretion of the board to determine.
There's a gas station on the same side of the street closer to 495.
The mobile station that's down there?
I was thinking it was Gulf.
Gulf, is it Gulf?
Keeps changing.
Is that 24/7?
I believe so.
I think so.
Yes.
Do you know the ones at Elm Street too, the Hess and the Mobile? I think it's Hess and Mobile. If they're 24 hour
I
too.
couldn't answer that, I'm not sure.
What was your question?
At Elm Street, we have two gas stations. I wondered if they were 24/7 also.
I think the Speedway is, because Speedway out on 44, I believe, is 24.
Okay.
I believe, but I'm not certain.
I'm never up that late, so, yeah.
Well, they have a different situation too. They're not surrounded by residential homes, so the board should take that into consideration.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I will add that I like how they have the double loaded sort of entrance and exit. It does allow for easier traffic movement within the site, and entrance and exits. And also that it's off of 138, so you're eliminating or minimizing backups onto Broadway, because people they're pulling out and they don't have to queue into Broadway and cause traffic backups.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, and while we're talking about traffic, so we did provide a traffic memo in response to the applicant's traffic report. And there's, I think, one minor item that we just need to address, and it's more about calculating, I think, accident rates. Is that correct? Maureen, accident rates? Within the, so, crash rates, so it's just a clarification of how it's calculated, but it doesn't change the final outcome, in that there's
Well,
minimal traffic.
Concerning traffic, passed by trips and limit significantly lower percentage use, 63% in the morning, 66% in the afternoon. I guess we should have you get up, but I have a question for you already.
Thank you. Maureen Schlebeck from McMahon Associates.
Those percentages passed by, what does that mean?
So when we're talking about a site like this, there's two types of trips. There's newly generated trips that you're at home, you drive right to Cumberland Farms, get gas, drive back home. That would be a new trip. And there's what we refer to as pass-by trips. Say you're on your way to work, you're going by the site, you get gas, you continue to your original destination. That's not a new trip, it's a pass-by trip. And so the comment that was raised in the peer review letter, we had applied 66% in the PM, 63% in the AM of pass-by trips, and that was taken from the Institute of Transportation Engineers data that they gather nationally for this type of land use. What MassDOT requires, they cap your pass-by to that it can't be more than 15% of the adjacent road traffic. It doesn't mean that your pass-by can only be 15%. It just means that if you apply 15%, that can't equal more than 15% of the adjacent street. So in our response back to niche engineers, we provided a table that showed in one peak hour, that worked out to be 11% of the adjacent street traffic, and in the other peak hour it was 14%. So we meet MassDOT's criteria on the pass-by trips.
Okay, that was my quick question. What else would you like to tell us?
I'd like to just address a point that Steve mentioned about bringing the tanker truck in and out of the site based upon the existing street layout and the revised street layout after the MassDOT project. So in light of this whole discussion about where Richard Street would ultimately wind up, we did go back and redraw the tanker truck, exiting the site in both directions and exiting by means of a right and by means of a left. And we have the turn templates that show it can happen in any of those directions under either street layout.
Steve, have you reviewed those?
I will.
You will, okay. When would you hope to be up and running?
We still have to go ZBA, which we have a hearing at the end of this month. We most likely will probably be looking at, if we were able to, probably start construction this 2020, March, April, I think, something around there. I don't have specific estimates as to when that is, but I imagine that they're probably not going to want to start during the winter.
Right.
I
So-
can get a firm answer on that.
No, I'm just, if you start, say, in March, when would you finish? When would you have your grand opening?
Once we start, it typically takes 3 to 4 months.
4 months.
4 months to fully construct.
Okay, so by the end of summer, Labor Day, you should be up and running.
Yes, if all
Okay.
permits.
So you would have everything that you're doing done by then?
Yes, we most likely have everything that we're doing done by then, correct.
And and I know you don't know, but what is the DOT schedule supposedly?
I think Phil has a better sense of that, but it's,
A year after.
They're expecting to start construction in 2021. So again, probably at the start of the construction season, spring of 2021.
So you're going to be up and running a year or two before they're done? If
Probably
they-
a year,
they
if both
are
projects stay on
schedule.
track, yes, a
Okay.
year.
All right, thank you. John, anything?
No.
Russ?
You know, the really thing is the operating hours. That, I think we need to talk about 24/7 residential area like that.
Well, I'm concerned about what they're going to have for lights at the back, for sure.
I can
And-
actually, I have a nice, you asked for some further information on lighting at the
Uh-huh.
last hearing. Actually have.
Thank you.
It's the company that prepares our lighting plan, that gives you the plan that shows all the numbers and all the decibels that come off the site. But they go a little bit further, and if you move into the fourth, fifth, and sixth page, this kind of gives you an understanding of what the lighting would look like on the property. Green light is very, very dim. Then it goes yellow and red. And as you can expect, underneath the canopy, that's where the majority of the light is. But the lighting on the property is focused downward. And these projects now really are able to keep the light as much on the property as much as possible. These heat blooms show from green all the way to the red. The lights on the side of the building, and actually, this is just a bigger blow-up of what's on there, but I think it's, this gives you a little bit more of the area that we're talking about in connection with the residential areas as well.
Are these light poles? These light poles all along here, or something else?
Phil, I mean,
let me pull up the lighting plan here.
While he's doing that, on the plan that I just gave you, as you can see, there is a tremendous amount of vegetation to the rear of the property as well, and the bulk of that is, there was a question last time as to how much wooded area is actually back in that area, which we are not looking to touch at all. And then we are, in fact, providing a substantial amount of landscaping on the side, as well as in the front corners as well, to really mitigate as much visual impact to the site from the abutters as possible. But I'll let Phil talk about the lighting a little bit further.
Mr. Chairman, did you have a question about a symbol?
Yes. Are those light poles?
Can I see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. They don't show much light coming off of them.
That signifies these landscapes.
Okay.
If you look at page 3 of that attachment, I'll give you a better sense of the locations of the lighting poles on the property, the circles. Red, not the red circles, I apologize. They're not circled. Yep, the red lights.
Okay. And then your later one shows, they're not red hot spots at all. They don't show as giving off light.
That's correct. They are giving off a minimum amount of light in those areas.
Okay.
The lights on the building itself, they reflect upward and downward. As you can see in the last heat bloom, it's the second to last page. You can see the lighting on the building, and you can see that they are reflecting upward and downward. And those are maintaining, surrounding the building. Those are there in order to provide visual for patrons coming in and out of the building.
Okay. Okay, well, obviously, because of all the residences, we will be concerned with lighting.
Absolutely.
But, Steve, you'll be checking on that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, what else would you like to talk about tonight, if anything?
That is really where we are. We are waiting on a formal response on the engineering peer review. I understand further discussions with Mr. Buckley at DPW need to be had, which will result in a formal response from that.
Yep.
I think we've addressed traffic, unless there's other questions about traffic at this point. The other thing I think that we would like to discuss is you also requested color renderings of what the
Yes.
what the architectural would look like, and I'll let Phil talk to that real quick.
Okay, so here is the some side views and face-on views of the building elevation in color. As you can see, it's a colonial design with gables, dormers. Cumberland Farms does wrap the base of their building in a stone veneer, and then has a vinyl siding with a combination of retail scale windows, as also as residential scale windows as well. It's a shingled roof,
There's a sidewalk along the front,
sidewalk along the front and along the sides.
the ballards there? In front?
Say it again? Yeah, bollards, yeah.
Ballards, excuse me.
So this is the elevation from Sylvain, this would be the elevation from Broadway.
Oh, okay, so that's the side. All right.
Well, nice-looking building.
I think the only other thing is, we have requested certain waivers. They are in Phil's September 24th response, but I thought in order to just have them in one place so you know exactly what we're looking for, I'd provide this list to the board. It's really just a regurgitation in one area of Phil's response of the waivers that we're looking for from the site plan
Okay.
guidelines. And they are addressed there. I think that's really all that we have for tonight. It seems like what's left is a formal response on the peer review engineering, as well as resolution of the issues that Mr. Buckley have.
Yep.
And at that point, I'm not aware of any other further information that the board would require, but I'm willing to provide any additional information you think you would need.
You ready to talk to us in 2 weeks?
2 weeks? Yes, we are.
I sent an email to Mr. Buckley about a meeting for next week, and I'm waiting to hear back from him.
Okay. I think traffic, we're all set. Mr. Buckley and drainage and streets are a biggie. Lighting and noise are just ongoing concerns. Anything else that you can think of?
Phil, could you put back the site plan, please?
Sure.
So as far as buffering goes, these bigger trees here, I'm not so sure those are the best location for those trees. It looks like you might want to use those in this area here to buffer the dumpsters from the residential view along that side. I'm not sure, those trees look like larger trees and probably not the best spot for it. Maybe we can relocate those and make sure we have a better buffer from the view of the residential neighborhood to the side of the building and the dumpsters.
Okay.
So that's one thing that I noticed, that the board needs to come up with some kind of condition regarding hours of operation, whether or not you're comfortable with a 24/7 or you want to limit that. There also should be some kind of condition that requires them to maintain a buffer back here, even though they're not going to touch anything. If there's any kind of vegetation that dies in the near future, if you give them a time frame, they should be required to go back and recreate a buffer that's adequate to buffer that from the residential zone.
Is that from the stuff that we will install, or is that from the existing?
Well, my concern is if you are dumping any kind of water, any kind of salt from the snow, anything that dies in this area should be recreated if it dies within a certain amount of time.
Understood.
To maintain that buffer.
Thank you.
What else? Internal signage that directs your traffic in and out of the development back to 138 and not inside the subdivision should be discussed with the board so that they know that your customers are not going to navigate around the rest of the neighborhood, or your delivery trucks. We want to eliminate the large trucks moving inside the subdivision. And that also talks about delivery times. If you do decide you're going to have a 24-hour operation, you should limit your delivery and your noise. We have a noise ordinance, so there should be no noise between a certain time at night and in the morning. 7 a.m. and 10 o'clock in the morning should be, in between those two times should be quiet time for the neighborhood. No one picking up the dumpster at that time, no one dropping off fuel or making noise for the neighborhood. That should be something that's conditioned also.
Mhm.
And then the last thing, I'll confirm it with the fire department, but you will have to have some kind of a marked fire lane. And I would imagine the only place you could do it on this property, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing so much with this lot, with this, but it's right in here. There'll have to be a marked fire lane, no parking fire lane. And the fire department's gonna wanna see that on the final approved plan. Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
Just one,
Yep.
the items that Joey just ran through, is the expectation that those would be hopefully conditions of approval, and then we can make one final plan submission with the landscaping, with the fire lane, or is that something that you're gonna need to see in advance of that decision?
I think most of those are recommendations, my recommendations to the board to use those as conditions of approval.
Okay.
If that's what they decide to do.
Yeah, because I think, you know, it seems to me that we are, that the main part of the layout is there, and that we're adding or subtracting things, and I think most efficiently would be make all those changes at once, and using perhaps an approval, you know, conditions of approval to do that.
That's what I actually suggest that they do, but that'll be up to them at the
Okay.
next meeting.
Right, continue it till 6:30 at our next meeting, which is November 7th?
Can I just ask a few questions?
Sure.
Thank you.
Chris Petty again, 2 Wayne Street, I'm in a butter. I just have a couple of questions about the border and stuff. I know they said they weren't going to remove any of the existing residential, the woods in the residential area. They will be removing, I think, 40 or 50 feet of woods right now, because that is part of the business zone. But it looks like some of that is in the residential zone, because they're building the building right up to the business zone line. And then on the plan, it also had a construction fence being put in about 10 to 15 feet beyond the business zone line. So it looks like they are taking some of the residential area woods, but I don't know if that's a part of the business property itself, but it's not, it is outside of the business zone. And also there was a snow removal storage in the back that's also outside the business zone. I don't know the rules following all of that. But one of my main questions is right now I can look through the woods, because my house faces the back. And I can look through the woods because it's top-heavy woods, it's not bottom. And I can see the China garden fence that's been there, which is not even close to the business line right now. It's pretty good inside the business zone. But it's got red slats, so it's pretty dark. But you can see that. So if they move it and get about 35% of the woods that are there now gone, that's gonna be right up, and I'll be able to see the back of that building. I don't know if, I couldn't tell where the fence, if there was even a fence in the back. I know there was on the sides, but I didn't know if there was a fence in the back. I just don't want somebody, if this goes through, to be able to walk through Cumberland Farms back and walk out into my house, right into my front yard. So I'd rather have something in there like China Garden had, which was the fence, making sure nobody can just walk right through out the back of the business. So I don't know if there's a fence on that backside.
I can answer that. So you're correct. So there is no fence there now. The fence is focused along the right side of Richard Street. So I think it'd be reasonable that we can add a fence along that rear property line. And I think we had already spoken about tonight about perhaps supplementing back in some evergreen area, or some evergreen or shrubs that would target that, 0 to 6 or 0 to 8 foot window that, since those trees are canopy, high canopy heavy, we can focus some trees on that lower vertical strata.
What kind of fence would you be talking about?
So Cumberland Farms proposes an opaque 6-foot-high white vinyl fence, mainly because it's essentially maintenance-free, as opposed to a wood stockade.
Well, I wonder about the chain link with the slats in it.
You like the chain link with the-
Aesthetically, you prefer the,
Oh, I
White.
mean, yeah, I think preferentially, I think the white vinyl fence is more aesthetically pleasing than
more
a
expensive.
chain link fence.
okay.
Yeah, that
All
would
right.
be definitely nicer. Those slats tend to fall apart, break.
Yeah, you gotta repair them once in a while.
I think the vinyl's much better.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, regarding the mentioned possible 24/7, et cetera, where is the, I couldn't tell on the thing, it's too small. Where's the pump, the air pump, and is there a vacuum with it? Because those are both quite loud.
Yes, so the air tower is located in the front here, and there is no longer any vacuums associated with the project.
Okay. And I just did some numbers off the traffic report. Just to say, I know that you mentioned that there wouldn't be a queue, but looking at their traffic study, it says there'd be about 140 cars either taking a left-hand turn in or taking a left-hand turn out during the morning rush hour, and 192 cars taking a left-hand turn in or a left-hand turn out. That's huge compared to what it is now. Of course, we only have 4 to 7 an hour, but that to me is just, it's really going to be a traffic headache having that many. That's not right-hand turns, that's just left-hand turns in a row. That's a lot, but I just wanted to make sure I brought that up. Oh, and their study also said it would go from about 25-second wait right now to 50 within 7 years. So that means there'd be a car waiting to take a turn in or a turn out every second during rush hour. It's a lot of traffic, but I don't know if anybody read into it as much, but.
Yeah, that was something else I meant to ask, and thank you for your questions, they're good ones. On traffic, the, what was it? It was 168 and 192?
It was 140 in the morning and 192 in the evening rush hour.
That is per hour?
Yes.
And how many hours are we talking?
So in our traffic report, we looked at an AM peak hour and a PM peak hour, and we projected the traffic for that. So when we took the trips that we assigned to the site, we assigned 50% base to the north and 138, 50% base to the south. And that's a conservative estimate. We also did a delay study, which is documented in our report. We did it, because there's so few vehicles using the 2 side streets right now, we did it a little bit south down the street at a strip mall. And what we found, in the morning peak, we were able to sit there and calculate the delay for the left turns and the right turns. When we went back in the afternoon to do the same thing, there were no left turns. And today, when you look at our counts on the 2 side streets, there were no left turns in the PM peak hour. And so traffic kind of seeks its own level, and what's happening out here now is people are not turning left in the PM peak hour. Our site being a site of convenience, and I've seen this at other Cumberland Farm sites, where if there's a heavy flow in the PM peak hour, people don't move against it. So our traffic numbers are conservative. I think in reality, as a traffic engineer and all practical, what's going to happen out here is people are not going to go to Cumberland Farms if they have to turn right in the PM peak hour. I mean, if they have to turn left in the PM peak hour to get back out onto 138.
I think you are correct.
Yeah.
Human
nature.
You were aware of the DOT study on traffic flow on 138 that they did? Bob and I were at the presentation they gave on fixing up Route 138. There are 25,000 cars a day travel on Route 138.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were aware of that number or not.
Well, Phil and I met with the team.
You met the same people who
at
talked to us?
D5 and HNTB with the
That's a lot of
designers
cars.
of that job.
Cars coming south on 138, are going to take a left turn into there. They're going to have some fun. It's going to be fun.
Okay, anything else?
No, the only other thing, I did have some questions that were answered while they were talking, so,
Okay.
earlier, so thanks for that. I did have notes for the crash statistics, because you can't really compare those, because there was nobody taking left turns. But you could use McDonald's, which is not good. The state also said that that's one of the worst intersections, we just had another death there.
It's in the top 5 accidents in the state.
And so I don't know if there's anything that can even be done for that. I know putting up signs no left turn does not work at McDonald's. So I don't know if there is. And of course, I'm going to want to have to take a left turn to get to my home. So I don't know if anything could be done with that. It's just the traffic overflow is extremely large. A convenience store or gas station has way more turnover than the restaurant had in the past. Restaurants, a lot. Like, you're there typically an hour, gas station, convenience store, like 5-7 minutes. So it's a lot bigger turnover, so I am concerned about that. We all have kids that are running around the neighborhood right now. We gotta do something to make sure they're not coming back to our yard, because they will. We did have a dead end sign put up years ago to try to alleviate that, which may have stopped some people from coming back there. It's not a dead end, but the town did put it up for us.
Yeah.
So that hopefully helped, but we do still have plenty of vehicles right now that come back. So we definitely want to make sure that there's clear distinction that don't take a right when you're coming out of the proposed station. So, but other than that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you have more to say?
No, I do not.
Okay. I make a motion that we continue this to 6:30 on November 7, 2019.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you for your time.
thank you. I make a motion to waive the reading and approve the minutes of September 5, 2019 and October 3, 2019.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we had bills that got paid, minutes. We don't have any correspondence. Planning quarter update doesn't have anything. Serpent update?
Serpent meeting is next week.
Okay. Plans to be signed? No?
No plans to be signed.
Okay.
No.
The other day, I called for an executive session because one of the board members had asked for it, and we actually ended up not discussing anything. But I was told that my Robert Rules of Order, I didn't do a good job. We need to actually vote to go into executive session. I need our other person who would vote.
Chris? He was there, I just saw it. You'll take it. You got it?
Yep, I
Have a
see.
good night, Steve.
Oh, here we go.
There he is. You got him, Bob.
I am told that in order to go into executive session, we have to have a recorded vote.
Let's do it. You need a motion?
Need a
Well-
roll call vote.
What's that?
A roll call.
Roll call, yes.
Okay.
Do we need to end the other meeting? And
Well,
then do this, or?
it's, I don't know.
I think we need to make the motion in this meeting
Yeah.
to go to the
Yeah.
next one.
So I make a motion that we go into executive session concerning a pending legal matter. Do I hear a second? I hear a second.
Who seconded that?
Russ.
I think we do it all in favor, and then we do a roll call vote.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Roll call, Russ.
Yes.
Burke, yes. Chris?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Okay, we go into executive session. We will not be coming back out, so the public meeting is ended.
Motion to adjourn then?
Turn the TV off then.
Seconded.
Shall we go in the other room?
I was going to say, let's just go in the other room.
Yep.